years from level 1 through level 4, currently level 3. Investigations was always one of my areas of interest, especially starting out as a judge. What I wanted from an investigation seminar when I was a level 1 judge, back to the old days, when I wanted what are the questions that I can ask somebody? How can I look someone in the eye and without any doubt know that they're a liar or not? Great ideas, great thoughts, that does not exist. That is my disclaimer for this. I can give you some guidelines, I can give you some tools. There's no straight script that you can pull out of your pocket and question 1, okay, what is your name?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Question 2, what deck are you playing today? It's not going to come off naturally. So we're going to go through this. I'll give you some tools, I'll give you some hints, but it's going to come down to your judgment. What is an investigation? Actually, if you've ever had some kind of player dispute in an event that you've worked, you've done the basics of investigation. What is investigation? It is talking with the people and trying to figure out what the heck happened. Usually it's pretty straightforward. You talk to this player, he says this is what happened. You talk to his opponent, he says, yeah, that's pretty much the same thing, that's what happened. You issue penalties if you need to, you get them started, end of story. Most rulings, most investigations are that simple. What happens when it breaks down is when the stories start diverging and you get this disagreement, and especially if you think something shady might have been going on. That's when you need to do a little bit more work. As far as us in the magic community and investigation, an important thing to remember, this is not a court of law. Our standard of proof is different. We do not need to prove that someone is a cheater beyond a reasonable doubt. We don't need to collect forensic evidence about and fingerprint his cards or whatever. No, that's the legal system. We need to be reasonably sure that something happened to damage the integrity of our event. If you're the head judge of an event, you're the judge, jury, and executioner. It's your decision. As simple as that. And if it can happen that you get into an investigation and you start realizing maybe something shady didn't occur. That is a legitimate outcome too. You're just trying to get to the bottom of what you think probably happened. One of the other things, I know when I was starting to look at investigations and cheating, one of my concerns is, oh my gosh, how am I going to catch this guy who comes in here and he's so prepared and he knows elaborate card shuffles and I don't know elaborate card shuffles and he can stack his deck. That's probably not who you're looking for most of the time. A majority of the cheating is the kind of opportunistic things. Oh, I drew an extra card, I have it in my hand. Well, maybe if I just kind of, don't say anything to anybody, no one will notice and eventually no one will be able to tell. It's a kind of spur of the moment thing. So, and that is something that you can, through asking questions, through figuring out what's going on in the game, you may be able to come with. There certainly are some people who probably do know some shady shuffling techniques or some other card manipulation techniques and come prepared with things that they may opportunistically try if the situation presents. We do our best to catch them. We can't watch everybody at a tournament. A lot of these get sparked because the player's opponent thinks that something funny happened. So the basics. Basically, you're trying to figure out what happened. Start out, you want to get both sides of the story. This is like any question, any situation that arises at the table. Have one player tell you, in your words, what happened. The opponent, in your words, what happened. Preferably without any interruptions from the other player. If something seems fishy or odd to you, then you might want to separate them, pull them away from the table for some more questions and explanations. What are the kind of red flags that can anyone think of any red flags that might make you wonder a little more about what's going on here?
Someone contradicts their own story.
That's a really good. Someone contradicts their own story. I don't mean just a minor change in it, but if something in the middle of it kind of flips from one thing to another, that's good. A story doesn't make sense. Those are some really good ones. If there are a bunch of, if extra cards are happening in on the picture and there's not a really good explanation, or they just kind of ended up there, And yeah, and in some cases, something that might make you a little suspicious if it's like a really suddenly timely game loss situation that's come up, you might want to just check into it a little more. But yeah, dramatic changes in the story, wildly divergent stories, explanations that just don't, you always have to use a little bit of your common sense. So when you've got this point, you pull the players away from the table, you want to talk with them a little more. One of the things that's often suggested is, ask them a few, kind of back off and ask them some kind of innocuous questions first. But the purpose for this is to try to get a baseline reading of how that person talks and reacts. Is it somebody who's very animated in the way they talk? Do they use their hands a lot? Are they very reserved and constrained? Because when you're looking for possible lying, here's another disclaimer. There's you may have heard the the kind of urban legend, if they look up and to the right and they're right-handed, they're lying to the. No. There are little micro expressions that are tells of something going on in the brain. But it's not, yes, this is a lie. Often looking up like that, that's thinking. They could be thinking up a good lie. They could be really concentrating and trying to remember what the heck did happen in the game. It could go either way. It's thinking. James is doing a really good demonstration of it right there. But to ask somebody, okay, now let me just get your name here. How's your tournament been going? What deck have you been playing? How long have you been playing? Some kind of things that they know an answer for, to try to get a read of what their normal conversation pattern and how they're answering those questions. And then you go into the, okay, just run through this for me again. Just tell me what happened again. And you might have some questions. Has this come up before in your game? For the opponent who called you over, notice this. What stood out? What made you notice this? Again, I don't have a real specific script for this. It's going to depend on exactly what the situation is. How has he been shuffling before? Was it different this game? Or how do you normally shuffle? What's your normal pattern there? Another thing you could do, repeat the story back to them. Now, let me see if I got this straight. And then send it back to them in their own words. But you're also kind of paying attention to what it is they're telling you. There are changes and there are changes in stories. Our memory, human memory, is not computer memory. We like to think it is. Something happened, we remember it, it goes into the brain, and it stays there. We can pull it out intact at any time, and it never ever changes. As I was going through and doing some of the reading and research for this, memory is incredibly flexible. And the way it works is actually more like every time we pull a memory out of the brain, we kind of go through it, and then we re-put it back in. And so it changes a little bit. That's actually normal. That happens to all of us. And sometimes you realize that, over time, that's why you get like conflicting memories. If there's like family events, you and a brother or sister remember something entirely different, that's the kind of thing that's going on in the brain. So if somebody has little changes in their story, well, maybe it's about 7-8 seconds that he was thinking, and that was at least 15 seconds. Yeah, it was about 5 seconds. That's little shifts that are going on. It could be cheating. It could very likely be normal. When you get a whole flip, the drastic change in the story, something completely changes. Sure, that card's in my main deck. What's that card doing there? And then okay, here's your list. Oh, well, I wrote on my deck list at the last minute, so yeah, it probably is supposed to be in my sideboard. Okay, you knew it either one way or the other. Here I've brought up the problem. You're coming up with a completely different explanation for it. So look for those kind of flips in a story. That can be very indicative that something is going on, and this is more a lie than just the normal changes that happen. When you do get some discrepancies, that's one thing that you can introduce into your conversation with the player. Now, wait a minute now. Which one is it? Is that card in your sideboard, or was it your main deck? You told me both things. But again, you're asking to get some information. You don't need to belabor it. It's also very human of us to kind of try and shuffle off responsibility. You can put some responsibility on the players. It's not your job entirely to come up with the explanation of what happened. This is something that I've seen in investigations that have used. Kind of, can you see how this would be a concern for me? Can you see how this might matter? That's a good question to ask them. You know, how would you feel if your opponent gave you this story? And it kind of puts people on another angle to realize, okay, you know, what did I say here? Especially if they do have a story, or you know, the story I think someone mentioned before that just seems really, really flimsy, really weak. You just can't quite believe it. Yeah. Okay, now you're here. Imagine I'm telling this to you. How would you feel about that? Another thing that I noticed, and somebody that I had some problems with one time, somebody enthusiastically suggesting that they know and will accept this game loss penalty. And they're working for that. That might be a clue that they know it's really something bigger, and they'll happily take the game loss instead of the DQ. I saw this in use when I was shadowing Jason Ness, a Canadian judge, is to take each player aside, look him in the eye, and say, I think you cheated. And see what their response is. Okay, well, we'll set this aside. And then you get the other player, and you've said, okay, you've given me your story. I think you cheated. Take a look at, see what their reactions are. Because, you know, if somebody is truly innocent, they're going to give you a kind of different response, and you might just get somebody who you face them like that, and they're like, you got me. It actually works in some percentage of cases, at a larger than 0%. And another thing to do when you're pretty sure you have a cheater and you know which one it is, you say, hey, this is how it looks to me. I think you knew that you had 5 birds of paradise in your deck. Come clean about it, and I can recommend that you won't be suspended for an extra length of time with it. There is, when it comes to the investigations committee, they do look a little more favorably on a player, even if he's done something wrong, if he's willing to admit it. If he does come clean. So that is a fair thing to put forth to your potential cheater. Not everyone will take you up on that. But again, some people just, they know they've hit that point and will say, yeah, this is what happened. One of the important things about investigating is once you're satisfied you have a DQ, stop investigating. Because it's really easy to keep going on, and players will help with that. I just thought of this other possibly extenuating circumstance that might explain this. Let me help you with this. No, once you're satisfied that you have remember, we're not going for the beyond a reasonable doubt level of proof. You're reasonably confident that something happened to screw up the integrity of your event. Stop investigating. If they have anything more to add, that can go in their statement that when you submit your DQ report. The other thing that helps you, because the more you investigate, if you keep asking more questions, you're more likely to go off on tangents. You're more likely to get stories that start diverging, and you're likely to confuse yourself. If you have this urge to keep investigating, if you have other judges there, get one and bounce something off them for a reality check. Because it might also be a sign that you don't think either player is cheating, but you've been investigating and talking with them for 15 minutes, and now what are you going to do? You better do something. So you're going to dig some more. So is it an indication that, okay, something wacky happened, but you don't think either player was cheating, it was just wacky? It's okay to stop and say, okay, this is just wacky, this is what I'm going to say, this is how I'm rolling, we're going on from here, let's just go. That can be a reasonable result. Maybe they weren't, maybe there wasn't a cheater, maybe it was just something weird. When it comes to trying to decide which version of a story to go with, generally the earliest statements made are going to be the closest to the truth. Remember, each time you retell it, as going through this, refining process in your brain, where you're the hero of the story, you're going to come out looking a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. So if you can remember the player's original stories, they're going to be the least divergent, and probably you're going to get your best information from there. Another interesting thing to look out for is suddenly the voice changes. It's not I did this or I did that, but then maybe it happened this way, or the cards kind of stuck together. Or this must be how it happened, where it's sort of taking the individual voice out of the story. You see this a lot when you actually see the write-ups from DQs, that all of a sudden they kind of change into this third person sort of voice, or I don't have any examples of it right with me, but it's really funny how the voice kind of changes to, and then this must have happened and the cards did this, and it's like taking the whole person out of what happened. But the other thing, try not to get too distracted by that. If you're focusing on, one of the investigations that gets turned in a lot is the kind of randomly determining a winner. Did you roll a die or not? That's where you're focusing on. And the external information about, my cousin was at this game and he said that it was okay to do this. We don't care. That other judge, told us that, that other judge is terrible, and he always tells people the wrong things. I see you all know that other, or at least have heard of that other judge too. If you ever find that guy.
There's always that random L3 with no name.
Yeah, and I don't know how he made level 3 with no name either. And try to keep neutral yourself in this investigation. Don't try to keep give off as little few tells as you can in your own body as to who you're favoring or not. That will draw different answers there. Odd situations can happen in events, and sometimes you may be able to identify them verify something with an independent source. It may be worthwhile. Sometimes these loose ends might be worth investigating. There was I think it was a GP where it came up where one player was playing with a bunch of alpha cards of a certain type. And that seemed really suspicious. The opponent called, "Is this deck marked? Now, why are you doing this?" And the guy was like, "I just bought them this morning. These are the only cards that were available." And the judge was able to verify with the guy that he bought these cards from that yes, indeed, he bought cards, all we had were alpha. And in fact, I also found the guy who sold the cards to that particular dealer, and that was all that they had. So it was indeed, it was marked cards, but it wasn't marked with the intent to cheat. And by doing that, following that path, they were able not to DQ this player. But again, you're intelligent people. Use your common sense. Use your experience as a player. Is this something you can verify? Is this something that you can verify and it's not going to take an hour to do it? There's always the pressure of the timing and the running of the event looming over you as well. Once you do, like I said, once you do make your decision, you're done with it, stick to it there. Any additional information the player wants to keep giving you, because believe me, they will follow you around. They will keep giving you more information. Have them write it down in their statement. They can give you as much as they want there. Okay. One of the things that judges are always really desirous of having is something to talk about cheats of physical manipulation and card shuffling and the kind of tricks and sleight of hand that you can do with this. I am not an amateur magician. If I were an amateur magician, I could tell you some nifty way to shuffle cards and keep track of cards, and you could watch for that, and then I could do the same thing again in a different method. That wasn't the one that I just showed you how to detect. So, a couple things that I do want to say about this. If you want to research nifty card cheats and how to look out for them, there's plenty of videos and stuff on YouTube on how to do that. There's a lot of ways to do that, but stick with some basics. Most of them are going to involve shuffling the cards or holding the cards in some way that's not the usual way that people are doing it. That's one key thing that you can look out for. That being said, even with standard shuffling, I don't know how much you have paid attention to, like if you're just doing the standard riffle shuffle, it's really easy to keep one card on top of the deck or at the bottom the entire time. I noticed this one time when I was shuffling cards. It's like, I just do this automatically. I do it the same way, and my right hand is dominant. That those cards flip farther than one on the left always stays on top. I have to make sure to shuffle differently to make sure that doesn't happen. Now, if you go watch your riffle shufflers vigilantly and see them always keeping the same card on top, are they all cheating? Well, you could probably DQ half the tournament there. That'd make for a short day. Yeah. That might be a kind of general education thing, and that's the thing. If you're then handing the deck to the opponent is shuffling. If there's a cut, that is going to move that card around. And that's an education kind of matter. Even the kind of mashing the cards in from the side. If you're not really careful, you end up with the same card on top all the time. If you aren't taking from different sides of the deck or doing something different in between. If somebody really wanted to try to keep a card on the top or the bottom of the deck, it'd be really easy for them to do that. If you're watching someone, if you're concerned about that, watch them repeatedly. Is that the same way they always shuffle? Do they kind of, is there some kind of peak, some way that you think they know what a card is and then are keeping it on top? That's the big thing about the manipulation, is can you tell that they know what that card is and are they keeping it there? And sometimes get a second opinion. Have somebody else also watch to see what that shuffling looks like.
Drawing the line be for like aggression as a judge investigating, and where is just kind of investigative techniques that are kind of designed to bring out the truth.
Okay. Part of it is a lot in your tone of voice. That I don't try to approach players, leaning over the table. And I know you cheated, confess. It's a lot more, if you're just crossing your arms saying, let me put this to you. I think you cheated. That's in a very, keep the voice conversational. You want to keep your own voice investigating this neutral, equal to both players. The more friendly or receptive you are, the more receptive a response you're likely to get from somebody. If you start getting really tense and kind of escalating up the tension, that's what you're going to get back from players, and that's what can get really frustrating. If you start getting frustrated and you start raising your voice, and then they start raising their voice back.
When you approach a table and obviously these two players are not going to agree on what happened, and it becomes obvious immediately, you break them up right away. You try to get their story straight. Like there's no just we don't agree on what's going on. Just immediately separate them.
If they clearly don't, and you have the space, take them apart, listen to their stories separately, because we're human beings. You hear someone, you have two different views in this event, and you listen to that guy. No, I'll pick on you. You listen to that guy right there, and he's telling things that, oh my gosh, he is such a lying liar. And
yes.
So if he's talking and I'm there hearing, by the time you get my story, I'll have a bunch of things built up to counter his arguments and vice versa. So if you can tell it's contentious right away, break them apart, get their stories separately so they don't have a chance to cross-contaminate right from there. Yeah, very good point.
To point out a quick reality check, Judge told me this once. He said, when you see something and the guy is blocking with spineless bully, which clearly says can't block, it's obvious, the guy that must be fraud, right? Well, isn't that the same guy that in most cases, a few turns ago, he just lost the game because he blocked the 8-8 trampler with a 1-1. Players miss the obvious stuff on both sides. So when you're looking at DQs, you need to think about it both ways.
Any other questions? Yeah.
How sure do we need to be to issue a DQ? Should we be 50% sure, 55, 60?
How do you measure whether you're 60% sure?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, do we want to go like gut feeling? Or we need to have some evidence, or
Let him finish. Let him finish.
Okay, you're asking about gut feeling and evidence. People DQ based on gut feeling. just reasonably confident. I don't have an exact percentage for that, but it doesn't, if you're putting it in percentage, it doesn't need to be 100%. Yeah, you're reasonably sure that something fishy went on, and that was the guy who did something fishy, and it's big enough that it should be a DQ.
Okay.
Kevin?
I wanted to expand a little bit on something you said near the beginning about if you're not sure how a story sounds, tell it to another judge or someone to see. I had a friend who used to be in journalism, and they called it talking about how a situation read. And it's like, well, in order to believe that he cheated, you have to believe that he put this card in his lap or whatever. In order to believe that he wasn't cheating, you have to believe that this card fell into his lap and that it fell into the bottom of the chair and he didn't notice and all of this, and it's which one of those is more plausible. And I find that helps me a lot is to compare the situations and actually look at it like a narrative, like a story.
Just to go back to your question, when you're talking about disqualifications, the question you really need to ask yourself is, how badly will the integrity of the event be affected by keeping this person in the tournament versus removing them from it? That's one of the questions you have to weigh and one of the things you have to take into consideration. Do you want this person to continue in the event knowing that he might continue taking similar actions?
Point I'd like to raise, if you have a sneaking suspicion that a player is cheating, like manipulating their library or something, but you don't think you have enough evidence to DQ them just yet, you can tell them to continue playing and watch them surreptitiously to see if you can get more evidence that way. That's also a possibility to consider.
Yes. Especially for manipulation type things, or not just you be the only guy watching it too, have someone else do it, have someone put a judge in, if it's a big enough event, put a judge in plain clothes to watch them. Kevin?
Or the flip side, if it's near the end of the day and you're not going to be able to get him, you say, look, we don't know for sure, but we have a strong suspicion you're doing X, and put the fear of God into them that they won't do it again. Do it again in my event and I'm going to kick you out because I'll know for sure.
Yeah. Any other questions or comments? Okay, I think that's a wrap.
Okay.